When I look back on my experience with Ralph Breaks the Internet, I think about a quote from the game Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy on the nature of prefabricated assets for video games, which he refers to as trash.
I don't mean they look bad or that they're badly made, although a lot of them are. I mean they're trash in the way that food becomes trash as soon as you put it in the sink. Things are made to be consumed and used in a certain context, and once the moment is gone, they transform into garbage.
I got roped into seeing Ralph Breaks the Internet, the sequel to the hit Disney film Wreck-It Ralph. And while the buddy with whom I went to see the film enjoyed it quite a bit, I came out feeling like I had wasted my time. The film was gorgeously animated, as per Disney standards, and it had a few moments that made me chuckle, but ultimately it felt incredibly forgettable. Despite its genuine efforts to have a compelling and unique message about change and respecting how we differ from even the people we are closest to, I can't really find anything of substance to say about the film on its own. It's okay. It's not bad, not by any means. It's perfectly competent, with a fairly cohesive and understandable plot, characters with clear relationships and motivations, an external and an internal conflict, the whole shebang. If the humor from the trailers tickled your funny bone and you were excited to see Ralph and Vanellope back on the big screen, then you'll probably have a good time. But if you're looking for something with a bit more substance, you might want to look elsewhere. But it seems I might be in the minority on this one. The film has a solid 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, and while Rotten Tomatoes is hardly a strong measure of a film's quality, I went and checked out a few of the reviews, and it doesn't seem like empty praise. People really like this film. They say it's a fun journey into the highs and lows of the internet, that it's an interesting exploration of the relationship between Ralph and Vanellope, that it's a clever, sharply written sequel that earns its place in the Disney pantheon. I've heard multiple critics even claim that it's better than the original. And that got me thinking, is it better than Wreck-It Ralph? So many of my problems with this film could easily be attributed to its predecessor as well. The cliche characters, the referential humor, the predictable plot. And there's certainly a good reason why Ralph Breaks the Internet lays claim to being a better film. It replaces the original's well-worn message of accepting people's differences with a more interesting theme of allowing friendships to change and grow apart for the sake of the people you love. It's been over 6 years since the first film came out, and I was still pretty young at the time, just 11 years old. Has nostalgia clouded my vision? Has my loyalty to a mediocre film I enjoyed as a child embittered an older, more cynical me to the prospect of a sequel? Determined to answer these questions, I sat down with the original Wreck-It Ralph to try and look at it with fresh eyes. And while I still have my biases, nothing about that has changed, I'd like to give my opinion on why I think Ralph Breaks the Internet doesn't stack up to the original. The first film has more than its share of video game references in it, and that is the core conceit of the film after all. So it would be hypocritical to suggest that Ralph Breaks the Internet is at fault for indulging in internet references. And, credit where it's due, the new film had much more of a challenge as the internet changes so much more rapidly than the video game industry. So creating jokes that felt relevant after a lengthy development process that an animated film of this caliber has to go through is a feat, and Ralph Breaks the Internet does an impressive job of not feeling out of date. But while the first film made the world of Litwick Arcade a lovingly crafted, nostalgia-filled background to the story, the sequel puts the internet front and center. For as much as the creators of the original clearly wanted to go wild with the video game setting, pouring every scene with numerous references and in-jokes based on the nuances of gaming, after the first 20 minutes, the film settles down into the film original kart racing game Sugar Rush, for a more grounded story with just as many food puns as gaming references. They even got Sonic in the film, but show some pretty serious restraint by only having him appear in a quick scene that serves the much more important purpose of world building. Meanwhile, in Ralph Breaks the Internet, the World Wide Web is the centerpiece of the film, and while there's nothing wrong with focusing your story on a particular setting, the insistent focus on the recreation of the inner workings of the internet makes the character arcs in this film seem tacked on, despite being crucial to the plot. The first film centered the story in a small corner of the arcade because the filmmakers knew that trying to use multiple, detailed, gamey locales would have spread the story thin. And that problem grows even more prevalent when your scope increases to something as vast as the internet. Yet, Ralph Breaks the Internet wants to have its cake and eat it too, so to speak, and refuses to focus its plot on one nook or cranny in the World Wide Web and darts around from place to place, coming up with ever more elaborate ways to shoehorn them into the story. The conflict starts to get lost in the rush of memes and references and witty visualizations of the internet's internal mechanisms. One minute the story is about navigating the vast internet to find eBay, then the next it's about stealing precious loot from an intense, edgy GTA-style multiplayer racing game, and then the next it's about manipulating popular trends to pump out money from an algorithm, which is not nearly as easy as this film makes it out to be, and then the next it's about fending off a virus that's corrupting the internet. The driving plot point is resolved with a good quarter of the film to go, and rather than this being because of a subtle shift in the characters' priorities changing their motivation, like it was in the first film, it seems to be because the film can't focus on any one thing in particular. This lack of a focused plot shows up in the world building. Both films need to establish the rules of the universe in order to make sense of the visualizations of abstract concepts that make up the setting. In Wreck-It Ralph, there was plenty of time spent on developing the world of the film, but none of it felt extraneous. The film doesn't just explain how all the video games connect, or what happens when a game gets unplugged, or the mechanics of Hero's Duty, or how glitches work in this world, or what would happen if someone tries to switch games just for the sake of answering these questions. All of it was relevant to the film. That information all came into play, and not just as tacked-on resolution to a 5-second conflict at the tail end of the climax like some things. But were core aspects of the story that helped shape the plot. While the world building was interesting, it was always subservient to the story. Everything from the detour into Hero's Duty, to the backstory of Turbo, to the bad Anon meeting, was there to reinforce the plot and themes. Ralph Breaks the Internet is full to bursting with neat little explanations for how the internet is transformed into a tangible world for the characters to explore. But to what end? Sure, it's interesting to see a visualization of viruses, or to see ads as people shoving signs in audience avatars' faces and being rebuffed by ad blogger bodyguards, or seeing YouTube videos, BuzzTube videos, portrayed as massive towns of screens with audience avatars throwing likes to be sucked up by the little internet workers before drifting off to the next video. But what does any of it add to the film? What narrative purpose does Spammy the ad guy serve? What does Ralph's journey to going viral with his slew of trend-surfing rip-offs and aggressive ad campaigns have to do with his feelings of insecurity in his relationship with Vanellope? Did we really need an entire scene dedicated to the bidding on eBay, or obtaining the virus from the dark web, or learning about video game looting, or talking to the sassy, fame-obsessed BuzzTube algorithm, or the frickin' Disney princesses? And it's not that one or two scenes in this film weren't strictly necessary or could have been streamlined. If every scene in the film is solely about furthering the plot or exploring the themes, the movie is going to move at a neck-break pace and won't allow the audience to get invested in the characters and the world they inhabit. The problem is that so dang many of the scenes feel this way. Even the scenes that did feel relevant to the story were usually dragged out with meaningless fluff to fill out the runtime because the meat of the film is so sparse and so bluntly told it can't carry the runtime. Wreck-It Ralph wasn't exactly what I would call a subtle film, but at least it respected the audience enough to weave its very obvious message into the characters and the plot and the world building, rather than just stating it outright and filling up the rest of the film with filler. The sequel is so unsure that you'll get that Ralph is feeling insecure, that the final conflict of the film has a virus trying to find vulnerabilities, which the film dubs insecurities just to beat you over the head with the point just a little more into the internet's code to duplicate, and chooses the worst insecurity, that would be Ralph's needy clinginess, and makes a bunch of Ralph clones that try to kidnap Vanellope. The conflict is obviously resolved by Ralph just flat out telling the clones the message of the film. And, dang, I know you're making a film for children, but come on. Anyone young enough to not get the point of Wreck-It Ralph isn't watching the film for the message. I can honestly think of no better scene to represent this film, good and bad, than the Oh My Disney scene. For context, at this point in the film, Vanellope is trying to help Ralph get his video viral and ends up on the run from security bots in the Oh My Disney website, and, in her attempt to escape, finds herself in a room with all the patented Disney princesses. The scene, like the rest of the film, is masterfully animated, with really great expressions for all the characters, and lots of little funny references thrown in to the way each character is animated. And technically, this scene isn't entirely irrelevant to the plot. Vanellope talks to the princesses about breaking into song, as Disney princesses often do, which leads to Vanellope breaking out into a big bombastic I Want song parody that explains her conflict. This scene, as you likely saw from the trailer, spends a lot of time just pointing out Disney tropes in a mocking fashion. You know how Disney princesses are always singing these songs about their internal conflict? Isn't that weird? And what about the fact that there's a lot of magic powers in Disney movies? How hilarious. Oh, and isn't it weird how bad things always happen to the Disney princesses in their films? It's almost as if films need conflict to be interesting. Ha! And you know how some Disney movies have creepy undertones, especially regarding their romances? Well, fear not, we also noticed. Let's all laugh about it together. Hashtag Bella has Stockholm Syndrome. It's just the laziest type of criticism. It's completely devoid of any nuance or any real self-reflection. It's just there to make Disney seem in on the joke. As long as Disney knows their films are repetitive and cliche, then it doesn't matter, right? As long as we get to see all our favorite stuff together, it's all good. We don't need to think about why we love these films. We just need to pump out the same iconography over and over and over again to bring back the memories of back when we actually cared. And just in case you caught on to our blatantly obvious marketing scheme, don't worry, because we're making fun of it all. We're not above criticism. We even criticize ourselves. Instead of actually trying to make something that will stand the test of time, Disney is content with just reusing all the things they already have. It's just reference for the sake of reference, and that's this film in a nutshell. The film offers a wealth of in-jokes about the internet, presenting this strange piece of technology with its warts and all, but offers nothing of value to say. The original Wreck-It Ralph wasn't perfect. I wouldn't even call it great. But it was a story that resonated with its audience when it came out, myself included. It was a story that its creators wanted to tell. It was a product made out of this little piece of time, this little moment in history where everything lined up just right. But that moment is gone. They've told the story they wanted to tell, and now it's over. And maybe it's time to just move on. Maybe it's time to tell new stories. Because someday this nostalgia well will run dry, and all that will be left are the stories that mattered. If we're ever going to move forward, we first need to learn to let go. Things are made to be consumed and used in a certain context, and once the moment is gone, they transform into garbage. I hope you enjoyed this very original video of a cynical nitpicker bashing a popular movie. See? I'm in on the joke too! To contrast all the negativity in this video, I thought I'd wrap things up with a few recommendations of recent media that actually feels like it has its own story to tell. Want a fun animated adventure to watch with your kids this holiday season? Give Ralph Breaks the Internet a pass and check out Hilda instead! It's an incredibly sweet little series on Netflix that's an absolute joy through and through. Watching this series feels like sitting by a fire with a cup of hot chocolate. I just love it. Looking for a sequel that makes references to its predecessor, relies on your investment in the original's characters, yet still manages to feel like its own story with a lot of love and passion put into creating a different experience? Ralph Breaks the Internet may fail in that regard, but Deltarune is an excellent spin-off to the hit indie classic Undertale that has a lot of charm that makes it its own. And it's totally free, so if you've played Undertale, which you totally should, don't let the fandom scare you off, it's a really fun game, then definitely check this one out. And if you've been craving a story about the pain of watching the people you love drift away from you to live their own lives and dealing with change when you just want things to stay the same, all told with cute cartoons and a pinch of retro game nostalgia to boot, then you need not settle for Ralph Breaks the Internet to satisfy your oddly specific request when you can play Night in the Woods. This game handles the theme that Wreck-It Ralph tries to shove into its pop culture vest a million times better in my opinion, while also having a gorgeous art style, a lovingly rendered setting populated by memorable characters, and an interesting mystery. And if you're not looking for that, then just play it anyways, because it's really good. It's really good. Seriously, you work at it. Just play it. Just go play it. Just do it.